So, as I was saying before, welcome to the Technical Difficulties Talk Show. Uh, but welcome to the Chaotic Wholesome Presents Talk Show, where every week we talk about TTRPG stuff, how to be a better player, how to be a better GM, how to be a better human being, how to be awesome at Baldur's Gate 3, even though neither of us have played it, all with an emphasis on intersectionality and inclusivity so that everybody can have a good time. And before we proceed to hear about the 800 things that Kay is doing, I want to say unequivocally on the record that all the things I say, all the mean things I say about Kay are lies. That said, not only has Kay told me to shut up multiple times today, but also like in a roundabout way told me to shut up by purposely muting me so that I couldn't talk on the all fabrications.
I'm so mean, everyone.
The meanest. And Ribonanza makes a very good point. Do not speak of the gremlins, lest we summon the hordes. We do have a mechanic for that, though.
And hello, I am Kay. I am your other co-host. I do a lot of things, but actually, it's funny you should mention, David, I don't have very much. Tomorrow, I'm doing Chalice over on the Initiative Order, which I'm playing Burton. They're good folk. It's a horror game. They're a little clueless. So this was finally at the end of our third episode. Burton finally got some horror. And I think I made the GM just a little mad. Not mad, just a little sad, because I reacted to the horror by turning around, taking a shot of whiskey, and walking the other direction. It didn't work out, but we tried. I am back here Thursday playing Palia. We will continue to play Palia until the Pokemon expansion comes out, and then we will go down that black hole. David, you are not streaming this Friday, correct?
No, I am helping a friend of mine move, but starting September, I am hitting it hard because I have goals to hit and enemies to overcome, mostly on the internet, and ambitions to fulfill.
And last but not least, Sunday, find me over on Girls Run These Worlds, where I will be playing Lobita. She's a wee hobbit who's got ambitions of taking over the Shire. Got a little bit of a rivalry going on with Bilbo, and I'm going to be surrounded by not one but two Tooks, and it is going to be a time. Welcome on in, Moxie. Hello. So yes, that is our plugs. It is fairly light content right now. For once, I'm not in I am in like 20 billion things, but they're all pre-recorded or on break or et cetera, not out yet. So today we want to let's see if this summons the gremlins, because I feel like with this line, the gremlins were always summoned. We're going to talk about a topic that I think few GMs actually get to the point of having this problem. Because as we all know, scheduling is the first enemy, the first big bad of TTRPGs. But we're talking about what happens and why it happens when your players are just not super feeling a game.
So for one, if your players are not having a good time, if they don't seem super engaged with the content, it's because everything you've done is wrong and bad and you should stop. No, ignore that. It is important to remember that tabletop games are collaborative. Everyone, a way that I don't hear it said very often is we all are responsible for each other. Like, we all bear some responsibility on both our contributions to the game and how comfortable people feel. Like, Kay and I are doing a thing, and we had multiple conversations with a couple of different people where we've gone, listen, the most important thing is that you are comfortable and having a good time. And if you are not comfortable in having a good time, then we have to fix that. If like lulls in storytelling happen, like people are divided about shopping episodes. Some people hate shopping episodes. Some people are like, listen, I'm here for the shopping episodes.
Right.
Let me know when there's another shopping episode. I will come back for that.
Some people want the combat. Some people are like, call me when the combat's over. I don't want to watch it. I don't want to play it. Hey, Matt.
It's like Kay and I have talked about many times on the show, we like different people want different things from games. Like some people want a first-person shooter, some people want a real-time strategy game, and then there are people like Kay who are hardcore casual players.
Yeah. Give me the most casual game in a spreadsheet, and I'm good.
Right. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and they're like, "You play video games because they're relaxing," and I'm like, "When have you ever known me to relax? Like, I don't even relax in my sleep. Like, what are you talking about?"
David and I have had long discussions about how I don't like a lot of the games David likes because I don't like being angry at the thing I'm playing.
And so she's like, "But you play Stardew Valley. Like, that's a relaxing game." And I was like, "No, you play Stardew Valley to win. Like, what are you talking about? Relaxation in a farming game. There are profits to be made. There are mayors to seduce."
David enjoys the Dark Souls.
Does David play Dark Souls? Yes, David plays Dark Souls. And I have a whole story about my first encounter with Dark Souls, but that is a tangent. Like we're here to talk about stuff. But yes, David plays. I think I've played every Dark Souls game in the series except for Demon Souls, which is installed on my machine and waiting for me to sit down and play it. And you know what? Because of you, when I get done with this call, instead of doing the responsible thing and tackling all the things that I need to tackle.
No, we are not talking about centaurs.
I am going to sit down and play Demon Souls until my fingers fall off tonight.
Different people want different things from different games.
Yes. So if you're going to have a strip club with centaurs, the stripper pole. No. But yes, different. Like, is it hands and hoof?
No.
Or is it both?
Focus, David. Focus.
So, different people want different things out of games. And the most important thing is to engage and communicate with your players, because you can throw all sorts of stuff at your players, and if they're like meh, then and so there has to come a point where you're like, okay, well, what do you want?
Yeah.
Do you want a strip club with centaurs? Like tell me, and I will put it in the game.
I was talking to a friend who was explaining, and it's funny because his talking to a friend, and his GM actually came on the show talking about a different game, but we started talking about the talk show because we were talking about his other TTRPG campaign run by this GM, where he's like, yeah, my GM just like we finished like this big arc, and my character like went home and saw his wife, and it was a really nice time. And then like someone shows up at my doorstep and says like, oh, by the way, you're a prince, and we're all gonna go help you reclaim your throne. And I was like, nah, I don't wanna. I got my wife, and I want to stay home. Right. And and so, you know, we were talking about that because he was he was frustrated that the GM sprung this on him. The GM was frustrated that he wasn't going on the adventure. And, you know, there were layers of, and so, you know, it was kind of like, he's like, what do I, and I'm like, well, what does the character want? And he's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, sometimes you finish a story and it sounds to me like your character completed their arc, has their wife, is settled down, and maybe they're done with adventuring and you should either bring in a new character or bow out of the campaign. And he's like, that's an like you watched the mind be blown, because sometimes it's not that the story is bad. Sometimes it's not that it's just not the right story for the right character at the right moment. I can't rule a kingdom. I'm a wife guy now. Exactly. But also, I have definitely been in situations where a GM, like, and I'll get to talk about this in not coded and veiled terms sometime in the future. Probably not until next year. But David and I ran a session last night where I had pulled together a long... It was a roleplay scene, but it was mostly my describing something to a character based off of backstory that he'd given me and kind of guesses that I made based off of what that character would need / want. And I was terrified that he wouldn't like it, because part of the reason for this was like surprising people, catching them off guard, making them face things they didn't expect. So I wasn't able to sit down and go like, is this what you want? Are you cool with this? I feel like every time I've done a session of this game and we've done like that deep dive, I finished it and I've been like, okay, are you happy with it? We can change something. Do you want me to change something? I'll change something. And everyone's like, no, it's great. You're cool. And I'm like, okay, but I didn't talk to you about this beforehand and it's really stressing me out and you're good. Talk to your players. It's so much less stressful when you're like, hey, doesn't seem like you're super into it. What can I do? Right? What's your character need? What do you need? Because sometimes it's, hey, I've been having a really hard time IRL. I've got a really important phone call to make after this session. I'm not really focused, so it's fine. You do your thing, and I'll be back in later. But sometimes it's, yeah, I didn't sign up to play royalty. Gonna buy Kay a bleep switch so they can push it when they talk about redacted. Right? It helps them feel invested too. Like, hey, there's this story thing. Would your character X or Y? Exactly, Matt. And, you know, springing things on players can be a fun surprise. But also, and this is something I know David is eager to talk about, sometimes you spring something on a player, but they 100% saw it coming. They're not surprised, and they're not particularly interested. David, go. I know you've got... We are not talking about centaur strippers. Heck you all. I love you all. Heck you all. For those of you who are new here and don't know, we lost multiple episodes to centaurs and centaur accessibility, and we were trying to talk about serious topics, and I'm not saying that centaur accessibility is not a serious topic, but it was not the serious topic we were trying to tackle. David, talk about failing to surprise players.
Okay, so...
Please, and thank you.
So, we're talking about this topic because this is something that I've run into. Kay has never had this problem because Kay only has the most interesting and dynamic storytelling in the history of TTRPGs. But for lowly commoners like me, your game is boring. And by your game I mean like my game. But your game is boring because it's predictable. It's like every step of the way is like, okay, you have the letter, you go across the street, you give the guy a letter, you come back, you get your money. And then what? It's like there's nothing, because what's exciting, well, one of the many things that's exciting and engaging is like there's this line you have to walk, and like anyone who's done game design or anybody who's like written a movie script can tell you there are things that are expected And you have to do those things. Like, have you ever played a video game and there's a waterfall and you go look behind the waterfall and there isn't a treasure chest there? Tears of the Kingdom, I'm looking at you. I went behind the waterfall, there wasn't a goddamn thing there.
I will slightly derail because one of my favorite features in Dragon Quest XI is you can turn, it's optional, but you can turn on a feature where villagers will be uninformed and NPCs will lie to you and be like, I heard there's a treasure chest behind that waterfall. And you trek out to that waterfall and there's no treasure chest. And you're like, I'm not allowed to kill NPCs in this game.
Right.
But I kind of want to. But it's so great because you never know what's an actual, it's good.
And it's you know, the same, like you know, in a movie, there's a reason that movies where the good person doesn't win in the end, like when Batman doesn't spin kick the Joker, because that resolution is expected and anticipated, but also what we as an audience need. And so you have these guardrails of things that are expected. Like, you want to give your players a fight they can win. Like, Kay and I are famous for, like, listen, we're running this thing. Not everything is something that you should punch in the face. But we can't run it like I'm sure there's a way to, but we have not yet run a campaign where you can't punch anything in the face. It's like, listen, that god over there, we're taking him down. Like, I was watching, it was Candace and B-Dave and Katiosaurus, and they were literally fighting. Luna? Yeah, on Gamer Mama Luna's channel. Which, if you haven't, go follow Gamer Mom Luna.
Yes.
Fantastic content. But they punched the sky in the face. I mean, I don't know if there was a face, but they definitely punched the sky. And also punched the ocean. Like you have to give your players things that they expect. But you also can't be boring about it. And so if it's very perfunctory, if it's very A leads to B leads to C, then your players are going to be like, And frankly, you're going to feel a little icky, like, telling that story too. So the number one advice is talk to your players. But number two advice is shake things up. And there are a number of ways in which you can shake things up.
And remember, and I lecture on this a lot, because they are both good and bad. Tropes are tropes for a reason, right? Don't try to reinvent a wheel and use zero tropes, because that is bad and not good. Tropes are tropes for a reason. You want your tropes. But you also want to subvert tropes in surprising and interesting and fun ways. This is not like from a GM seat point of view, but in Emergency Power Podcast, I brought in my Solarian. Hey, Leslie. I brought in my Solarian, just speaking of the Emergency Power Podcast, brought in my Solarian, and the first big combat, like, I wanted them to be a little bit shady. I wanted to make it very clear that, like, this is not your typical Jedi type character. I wanted them to be shady. So one of the first things I did was in one of the first combats, they did a whole monologue. They were on the good guy side. They were fighting the bad guy, but they did a villain-length monologue in the middle of a combat. And I'm like, GM, you can cut me off at any point, but
hot.
Because someone's monologuing, that's a bad guy thing. Why is a player character monologuing? So again, you've got the fetch quest, right? Your quest is to go kill these rats in the basement. And you get down there and you're killing rats in the basement and you're like, this basement's really well kept and really well lit. And these rats are not as gross as rats in a cellar usually are. Interesting. You come back, you collect your rewards. You found out, oh, this was an alchemist's basement and they were running experiments on those rats, and your fetch quest just set an alchemist, an inventor back several years of research. Because you were used
and now
to play.
you have an arch-villain.
Use your tropes. Figure out interesting ways to go like, okay, they expect X, Y, or Z. What's just an interesting little twist? Or even throw out fun little unresolved things. Yeah, you go through there and there's a woman staring at you. I go to talk to her. You turn to your companions, nod to say, I'm going to go talk to that person. You turn back and she's gone. You don't ever have to answer it. You don't have to have a plan, but put it out there, see what the players do with it, and let them guide you to something interesting.
Or what happens if you go down into the basement to kill the rats, and the rats are like, please don't. Like,
Bronze Girl did that.
See?
That was a thing in Shikar. It was very fun. In Shikar,
Yeah.
not Chicago captions.
Chicago.
Hey,
Cheese under
JD,
the
welcome
sauce.
on in.
Cheese under the. Listen, I refuse to call Chicago style deep dish pizza because the cheese is under the sauce, and with pizza the cheese is on top. And I'm not gonna say, like, there are too many people who try to argue that Chicago deep dish doesn't taste good. Like, you're objectively wrong about it. It is good. I'm just not of the camp, and I understand that there's a look. This is not a hill I'm willing to die on. Okay, Kay will tell you there's no shortage of hills that David will die on. But is Chicago deep dish pizza actually pizza? Is not one of those hills. Do I think it's pizza? No. Am I going to leave that argument to other people? Absolutely.
What does this have to do with reinvigorating a cooling campaign, David?
Now I got to find some way to like tie it.
I'm excited. I'm waiting to hear this.
But okay, so if you look at your campaign like a pizza,
delightful.
You go. Okay, there's the pizza dough, the bread, the crust, and the sauce and the cheese, and it's like we have these components. These are the components that make a pizza. Everyone expects crust, cheese, sauce. But what if we shake it up a little bit? What if instead of putting the cheese on top, we put the sauce on top? And then now we have this new experience that people are going to spend 100 years arguing about. And I know it hasn't been 100 years since A, the invention of the American pizza, and B, the invention of the Chicago style pizza. But I guarantee you, on the 100th anniversary of both, because they were probably invented in different years, there's going to be an article in a newspaper that goes celebrating the 100-year anniversary of the invention of this, where the debate about Chicago style pizza rages on. But
here's the real debate, David. Is cereal with milk a soup?
yes, absolutely. No, it's a chowder. Chowder. No.
Chowder.
But things you could do to reinvigorate is the easiest thing to do is to change location, because some of the best writing advice I ever got is every story is about one of two things. Someone shows up or someone goes somewhere. Every Lord of the Rings, that fuck off mountain very far away, need you to take your big hobbit feet and walk all the way over there. In a straight line, 3,000 miles? Absolutely not. We're taking a circuitous route.
Can we call the Eagles to help? Not until the final act.
Right. Way too easy. Um,
What about Cheers? Leslie says nobody goes anywhere.
but that's just it. It's about people arriving. Like, it's a set location, and what makes the dynamic storytelling is all the people who show up, and um uh uh, uh and that's when things happen. That the same thing with Taxi. Uh, the same thing with the what's the show that was about Wings, because, and
Wings.
the reason I thought of Wings is because at DS9, the woman who plays Jadzia Dax was the front desk attendant person, and that's the only connection because I never really sat down and like watched Wing. But like every sitcom, well, not every sitcom, but a lot of major sitcoms are, this is the location, and people show up to this location and things happen. Now, I wouldn't recommend anyone watch Friends. I've watched precisely 2 episodes of Friends, and I can't figure out, 1, why people like it, and 2, how it ran as long as it did, and 3, how it made so much money that they paid these people life-changing amounts of money, like never have to pick up a piece of paper ever again, amounts of money. Yeah, like Rex said, most plays take place in at most a handful of locations. Um, and so if your players are somewhere, give them a reason to go somewhere else, and then come up with weird shit that happens along the way.
And this is something I I can verb. This is something I intentionally wrote into the God Plane. For those of you who've watched it, the horror campaign, don't watch it, Leslie. It's very spooky. One thing I really picked up on as a child watching 80s movies, Neverending Story, The Last Unicorn, The Labyrinth, like all these places, while these movies were not that long, they felt incredibly long and incredibly epic to your brain because they hit a bunch of locations. So I'm like, how do I steal a little bit of that? Oh, we just keep sending people to wildly different locations and wildly different places. And every time you change a location, you can hit, like in God Plane, some episodes, like the house, obviously we didn't go places, but in those first few episodes, we will hit, depending on the group, 2 to 5 areas, 2 to 5 different planes with different biomes, different behaviors, different rules of physics sometimes. And players finish that episode and they're like, we did so much. We went so many places. That episode felt so long. When all we did was just like point A to point B to point C, but because they were all so different, it felt very different.
I mean, because I always talk about Star Trek. The juxtaposition, what made Deep Space Nine so different than all the other Star Treks, is all the other Star Treks were, we go somewhere. And Deep Space Nine was, we stay right here and things come here.
We just had a talk about DS9 in the Emergency Power Podcast Discord today. And it's still my go-to Trek. It's my favorite Trek. I will die on that hill. You don't have to like it, but it's mine. David's deciding exactly how much he wants to throw down about this.
No. This is a rant that Kay has heard from me before, and that everyone will hear from me over time. There is a big difference between I like and I don't like versus this is good and this is bad. And too many people conflate the two. There are plenty of things that I like that are objectively bad, terrible, awful. And there are plenty of things that are good that I don't particularly like. And there are some things that I like that are good, and there are things that I like that are bad. But too many people come at me and be like, this is objectively good because I like it. And I'm like, you sure about that? You really want to embark upon this with me, Mr. I have to tell people why their stories are bad for a living? You really want to bring a story to me and be like, this is good, your opinion, and that's the other thing. There's a difference between an opinion and an informed opinion.
Mm.
Like science. I've said repeatedly to people, science is a religion. Science is something you believe in or you don't believe in, because none of us have the time, energy, money, or expertise to not just understand how things work, but obtain the level of expertise where we can do the proofs
Mm.
and experiments to show why things work. Like the scientific community still doesn't 100% understand how gravity works. Do we all know gravity works? Yes.
Mhm.
If I
We
jump off of the
understand
top
that
rope,
it's too weak and it should be stronger, and we can't explain why we're able to so easily overcome a fundamental force of the universe. I think it might be halfway in another dimension. We're not sure.
right?
Gravity's weird.
And time and light, like anybody who's seen Oppenheimer, there's the line of like, is light a wave or is light a particle? Yes. Does it make sense? No. Here's the math. And it's like, and it's something that we just have to accept. Um, because like if you threw me in time 300 years ago and asked me how a cell phone worked, I could give you the basics of like, well, it does this, and then there's an antenna, and then the antenna talks to. But if you're like, now
Go
make
build
one,
it. Yeah.
absolutely not.
Yeah.
And so like, you know, in a lot of ways, science is a religion. You just gotta have faith that the people in the fancy outfits know what the hell they're talking about. Um, but the scientists are better at convincing me of things than other people are.
I
Steak
love
is
that
that.
chat is just Pop Tarts are ravioli, steak is salad, lasagna is cake.
How is steak a salad?
Because there's no starch.
So
That's the cubic, what is it called? Cube rule? Have you not seen the cube rule of food?
no.
Scroll up, cheese and Krakens, put it in chat. The cube rule is excellent. This is 100% not on top. But again, it shows
Lasagna is cake.
it leans into
Lasagna is meat cake. I mean, that's fair.
again, different people want different things from different games. Leslie and I have a wonderful time playing in the Emergency Power podcast. There are games that I run and that I love that I'm like, Leslie, you shouldn't play in this because you will not. Leslie is not allowed to play in my horror games. Not because I don't love Leslie, but because Leslie would not enjoy my horror games. I want to play all of the games with Leslie, but I also want to make sure Leslie
Yeah.
has a good time.
If Leslie's not having a good time, none of us are having a good time at the end.
Exactly. And there are people who love TTRPGs and would love to play in games with me, but right now most of my games are streamed and they're like, I want to play with you, but I do not have the courage to perform in a streamed game. That is too much pressure. That is not what I want. So I will hang out with you when you get into the next home game, right? This is true of all of the things. And we talk about, especially when David and I run horror games, we go through beforehand, we have consent, we have safety check-ins, right? We make sure we know what everyone's okay with. And then there is also the disclaimer of at any time, your consent can change. You can revoke. You can say, hey, you know what? I was fine with X, Y, and Z when we signed up. But guess what? I just had a major dental surgery and I don't want to see any teeth horror. Right? That is, I'm not okay with that right now. I was fine with this thing before, but I just had a major loss in my family. So there's 3 topics now that I don't want to deal with. And that is absolutely fine, okay, encouraged, and should be done. The same thing is true with your pillars of your campaign. Because we've spoken about, especially if you are running a streamed game, especially if you are trying to gather an audience, especially if you are trying to figure out how to market your actual play or your podcast, whatever you're doing, in the sea of other TTRPG content, it is so helpful to have a condensed version of what is this. So with Godplane, it is an original 5e horror campaign. 4 very unlikely heroes are summoned to stop a nightmare. Simple but clear. You generally know, oh, I like unlikely heroes. It's horror. Not into horror. I'm not going to watch. Figure out what is your pillar of your campaign. What are you doing? Because if I show up to a table and I'm like, heck yeah, we gonna have all the characters, we're gonna have all the stories, we're gonna play with tropes, we're gonna role play, we're gonna go on grand adventures. And David rolls up and says, awesome, meat grinder dungeon crawl. I'm not saying we're not both gonna have a hard time, but it's gonna be way more challenging. If you are trying to build not just a table of players, but also an audience who will watch and support you and your players, you've really got to have that little pitch down. You've really got to know what kind of game you're playing. And as we spoke about with my friend who was like, oh, my character doesn't want to be a prince and doesn't want to go on this adventure. The things you want might change. You might sign up for a meat grinder dungeon crawl and you get in and you're like, this wasn't as fun as I thought it would be. Or this is heavier, right? I changed jobs. Something in my life became more stressful, and constantly doing the math of a meat grinder is not what I want to do. So I'm not having fun. So thank you for inviting me. I've had a great time being part of this. I'm going to have to bow out because I don't want to. Why did my captions all of a sudden go all caps? Interesting. That scared me. But yes, things about your campaign, things about your table, things that you want can and likely will change. And that is not only okay, that is good. So again, talk to your players if things are cooling. If stuff isn't feeling right, chat it out. I promise it'll be better. I feel like we have completely lost David to the rule of food.
Okay, so I get why steak is a salad. Look.
I knew we'd lost it. I just kept going because I'm like, sooner or later he'll pull himself out of this, but we're not there
salad
yet.
is soup. And soup is a salad. I'm not sure a turducken would be a salad. It's more of a wrap. Oh no, a salad is nachos. And a soup is a salad. And a steak is a salad. I get it now.
Rex says, that is a good way to go. I ask my players what part of their arcs/plans they want to do next. And yes, so even within Peek Behind the Curtain, when we ran Godplane, first and second campaigns, like we kind of got to the point of the house. And when we got to the point where we're at the house, we're like, okay, y'all, we are just about halfway through this campaign. Things are going to start speeding towards a conclusion. So if y'all are looking for some RP, for some character connections, like now is the time, because if you wait and wait and wait, you're going to end up at the end of the campaign without getting that juicy RP in. So keeping your players informed of kind of like, hey, and even if you're not giving away the whole thing, but like, hey, I'm kind of thinking about or planning doing something like this. David, you might want to move your mic down or away from your nose. You're just hitting. There we go. We were getting like.
Oh, really? David needs a shave.
So in a cooling game, When do you know it's reached the end of whatever is recoverable? Full Final Fantasy
I have
Sephiroth, no
a-
reviews, no revives.
I have a controversial opinion on when a campaign should end.
Oh boy.
Whatever is going on in the world does not matter. All that matters is, have your players achieved their goals? Because, like, let's say your boy Sephiroth is out there compensating for an inadequacy with his extra long sword.
It's a really big inadequacy.
Um, you know, having cut down everyone's favorite mattress performer. Look, that's a whole that's we're not going to go there, but there's a very reasonable fan theory about what Aerith actually does for a living. Anyway, either way, she got what she deserved. No,
I mean, I don't
all
disagree. I don't like Aerith.
The meteor is coming. But if your goal is to turn out Cloud into the feminist femboy, and then he shows up in pigtails and a dress with lipstick on, you have achieved your goals. And, like, do you have the capacity to stop the meteor? Maybe. Maybe Cloud does. Is that what you like? Is your character particularly motivated to do so? Like, is your character a millennial and is like, just let the meteor win? Like, then you're not necessarily going to do that. If in many campaigns, saving the world or saving the city or saving a population aligns with the goals of the players and the player characters. And if those goals align and then they achieve, you know, saving the world, great. But if that is not their goal and the world is ending, whatever their goal is the most important thing. Like Candace has run several games about like high school students. And we've seen other games where it's like, I want to have a castle, or like the character that you were talking about earlier. I was like, I'm married, like I'm settling down now. And it's like, I'm a lost prince. That's fine. I'm happy here. And so, no matter what's going on with the world, what matters is what matters to the characters.
Mm-hmm. And never doubt my Google Foo, Rex. Never doubt my Google Foo. I worked for DeviantArt as the lead moderator for 15 years. My Google Foo is epic.
Yeah, if anybody is going to find your secrets on the internet, it's going to be Kay. So
I started watching Agretsuko going, I'm going to be Retsuko, it's going to be great. And I'm like, I am Finiko.
Which I do need to sit down and watch. I have not watched it yet.
Yes, you should. Here's the thing about Agretsuko. It gets way too heckin' real. Like, you're like, oh, it's a cute Sanrio. It's adorable. It's about a red panda. I'm going to go lay down. But, yes, sometimes arcs need a soft ending. Also, look, we talked about this at the very beginning. Often, the biggest and baddest enemy in TTRPG is simply scheduling. It is time, it is work, it is family, it is whatever. It is someone moving away and things just aren't the same on Zoom or Discord or however you do your games. So sometimes sometimes a campaign is cooling. Hey, Candace, welcome on in. Sometimes a campaign is cooling, not because there's anything wrong with the campaign itself, but because finding the time that everyone can get there and it's canceled, 3 out of the last 4 times, and everyone's inconvenienced and everyone's frustrated, and so made pizza and or lasagna. You can argue which one it is in the chat. I'm not engaging with that further.
It's a cake.
For the table, and then we canceled. So then so-and-so ended up with an entire sheet tray of lasagna pizza and is mad about, like, that can be a stressor in your campaign. And if that is the case, I just read a whole thread about this, which is truly brilliant. Welcome on in, Jason. Which is, I think, a brilliant way to conclude. Like, we've been playing this game for a year and a half. We haven't been able to play in like 3 months, or we've played twice in 3. Everyone's frustrated. We know that this is probably not going to go very, like, we're all frustrated. What do? Do like a montage episode. Do a one final send off. Be like, everyone, give me 4 hours. Everyone get to the house. Everyone get on the call. Sit down with everyone. What's most important to your character? And hit all of those major points so that every character can have their story concluded, so that the party can decide what happened, what is our legacy, who got together, who tried to punch God, right? And put a bow on that campaign and quit fighting against the literal forces of nature and time. Quit arguing with time and space about making this campaign carry on, and send it off fondly so that then everyone has that happy little bow on it memory so they can go forth and start a new campaign.
A friend of mine ran a TTRPG home game that was a bunch of wrestlers, like WWE style wrestlers. And there were a bunch of different belts and a bunch of different championships. And the game ended, like they wrapped, when one of the players won the championship and then defended it successfully against their arch nemesis, and all of the other players who also like had won their championships all came out, because all of the arch nemesis like goons all came out, and there was this big like 30-person melee. Apparently the math was insane.
Believe it.
Luckily he's a math person. And they had like this big knockdown drag out, and it ended with the arch nemesis and all of the other goons getting expelled from the federation or league or whatever you want to call it. And they looked around and they're like, all right, we're done.
Hmm?
The other same dude had a home campaign that actually ran for like 3 solid years, like every week for 3 years. And everybody was level 20. They punched God directly in the mouth.
I was going to talk about this one. I was going to have you tell this one.
And then they looked around and they're like, okay, well, what do you do? And so he's like, okay. And so they get done. They have their denouement. Like everybody's like, oh, well, you know, I did this. And then he's like, all right, we're playing next week. And they're like, but how? Like, we won. Like, we rode off into the sunset. And he's like, be here next week. And so they show up and he hands out character sheets and says, all of you wake up. 4,000 years have gone by. You don't know how you got here or why you were here, but now you are in the future and none of you know how anything works, and you're all level 1. And he put them into a I think it wasn't Starfinder, Spelljammer, one of the futuristic like cyberpunk TTRPGs. But he just took all the characters and slapped them in there and was like, and here we go. And everyone, and I mean every single player was like, yes, we're doing this. And
Because
built a whole new campaign.
That's a whole other thing that can absolutely happen, which is like, cool, I really like this character. I like the campaign. Something about it is not working. Maybe you as a GM, you know, look, high-level GMing can be challenging. How do you balance encounters past level 15 in D&D? It's really difficult. Low level, level 1 in D&D, it is so easy to just wipe a character accidentally. One bad roll, and you can just eliminate someone. The opposite is true. On the other end, it is so difficult to kill a party post level 15 in D&D. And yeah, level 1 is very rough. I'm like, let's start at level 3. You have tools. You can do things. You've got enough hit points. Let's do level 3. So, and again, maybe you all started, yes, we are TTRPG nerds. We're in the grindy system. We're playing 3.5. And then you start getting to those higher levels and it's getting real grindy and it's getting real crunchy. It's getting real difficult. And maybe at that point you look around and go, how can we change these characters over into a Blades in the Dark or Savage Worlds or any Powered by the anything rules light? How do we change? So maybe a change in setting, maybe a change in system can make that difference. And again, a big part of it is talking to your players. Yeah, the level cap in Baldur's Gate 3 is 12, apparently. I did not know that.
I was going to bring that up, yeah, because Larian Studios was like, so the wish spell. How are we gonna implement the wish spell? Because we can't not have it. So if you get a higher level, like and like wish isn't the only shenanigan that can be implemented with the spells that you get in higher level. Like the level of shenanigans that you get once you start getting like level 4 and level 5 spells are ridiculous, are universe breaking.
Yeah.
And so
you at level 20 as a cleric, if you go all the way and you don't multi-class, you are guaranteed 1 miracle from your god per day.
Yep.
Your god will show up and smite someone at your command.
That reminds me of a campaign idea that
yes, but we're not talking about that one because we're going to use it. We're going to use that
we're
one.
absolutely
I like
gonna
that one
use
so
it.
much.
It's so good.
And yes, Candace, I need to play. I'm wording this correctly. I need to play Savage Worlds with you, Candace. I need to play all of the Savage Worlds with you, Candace.
Well,
I've said that for 2 years. I believe you will get to play it again, Moxie. And again, Candace, you ever want to run Savage Worlds, you tell us when and your players, and we will make it happen. Shadowheart does learn Divine Intervention, but you can use it exactly once. So, I mean, in 5e, as a cleric, I forget what level, but you do get Divine Intervention, and it's a dice roll, and you roll a d100, and you have to roll at or below your level. So it is a very low chance of it happening until you hit level 20, when once per day, your god will be your bench and will show up and sit on someone for you. Of course you will make something cool, Candace. There is no doubt. I'm not going to lie. I really want to run ponies again. I know it's not Savage Worlds, but there is something really fun about the D20 plus the skill die that I'm like, I kind of want to run more ponies. That's the next thing. We're going to take we're going to take the Godplane characters, turn them into ponies, and throw them into Equestria.
Actually, is there anyone? I don't think there's anybody at that table who would object to that.
I don't think so. Pony plane.
There is a pony plane.
Yeah, the bony plane is what happens when you start introducing romance into. So that's technically clopping. I don't want to talk about this. We are changing the subject.
We're not talking about clopping nor yiffing. Both are verboten. There are many topics we will cover on the Chaotic Wholesome Presents Table Talk Show, but clopping is not one of them.
Yeah, no.
There's enough discourse on the internet already. In fact, there's a whole rule system. There's at least 34 rules. So
Bowser
Google,
is 34 years old.
Right. So go Google clopping rule 34.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
Don't do it.
Don't do it.
Don't do it.
But, so yes, the obvious and the most difficult, because it is really, really difficult. Because here's the thing, especially if you're a GM and you feel like stuff isn't going well, it is so hard. It is so hard to walk up to your party and be like, do you guys like me still?
Yeah.
Are we still friends? What do you... And you really do have to, and it takes discipline, and it's so difficult, but you have to go like, my friends are not bored of me. There's just something about this that isn't clicking. And even if your friends are showing up and it's kind of a meh reaction, they're still showing up. They believe that they know you do cool stuff and they want to tell cool stories with you. So they are still showing up, waiting for that spark. And just because you and your friends aren't perfectly in sync doesn't mean that you're a bad GM or that your story is bad or that anything that you're doing is bad. It just means there is a disconnect somewhere. And if you're feeling it, your players are probably feeling it. And it really is best to just sit down and swallow that fear of like, they're going to be mean to me. And someone might be mean. And that's really sucks. But you know what? If someone is mean, and then the rest of the table says, yeah, I've actually not been having fun because that person's been mean. That's might be your problem right there, right? So sit down and talk to your players and be like, hey, I feel like maybe things just aren't. And this is, a whole reason that the West Marches style games exist, which is a GM was like, you know what? I've been running this game for a long time. And people show up, my players show up every week, and they say, entertain me. What you got? And West Marches said, I want my players to show up and say, I'm curious about this, and I want to build campaigns around that. And it worked. And that's Brennan Lee Mulligan said in a whole thing, like when they're setting up for Dimension 20 campaigns, he sits down and he gets the general setting, the gist, the pillars, what they're going to be tackling, and is like, cool. Here's the general world. He doesn't flesh out the world before he gets the character sheets. People hand in the character sheets and he's like, oh, no clerics. I don't have to build a god system. The gods are not important here. The gods will be there in the background, but I don't need to have the whole structure for the gods because my characters are not going to be interacting with that. I can focus my attention on something else. So again, maybe that's part of the problem is you thought this campaign was going to be about X and you pulled a whole lot of attention into X and everyone went off to Y and you're trying to shove everyone back into X because that's what you built for. And that's not a failing on you. It's just what clicked with your characters.
And that brings up an important point about world building. Because as a GM, there is a certain investment that you have. Mm-hmm. And as many of us have built a homebrew world with all sorts, just everything. Like, mm-hmm. Kay and I both have independently and together gone and researched not only the history of real world places, but also the architectural designs of things and how they are built so that we can incorporate elements of that into the game. And it's there comes a point where no one cares about what type of stone is used to build a particular temple, and the conflict between the people who mine one type of stone and the other type of stone, and the bidding war that happened, and the politics that came into play about what particular type of stone was used. It's already boring with me talking, explain, just going over the very, mm-hmm. and then the blackmail and the infidelity and the political intrigue. Now, for some people, this could be really interesting because it can get really spicy. Who's sleeping with who? How many naked people there are at the party?
Look at Game of Thrones. There was a lot of boring politics, but they didn't really focus that much on the boring politics. They focused on who was banging who out of wedlock, who
Right.
was illegitimate, who was hiding illegitimacies, who was rising the ranks while running a whorehouse, right? But also, I'm going to bring it back to Cato, our resident chaos master.
Yes.
Cato came in with a dwarf and we were in some mines, and the dwarf was fascinated and incredibly critical of the human minds. And I think you said, David, you had no intention of doing a whole history of what the mines were. They were just going to be like, there was just going to be a mine. We were going to go into it. We were going to find the thing. We were going to heck off. But the dwarf is like, judging that. That's cool. Judging that in the funniest ways. So it spiraled out of control into a much bigger thing. Not because David went, I've learned everything there is to learn about mines, and mines are really cool, and you're all going to learn about mines. But because a player went, I can have fun with this with my character.
So we all build and invest into our worlds, and it's fun, but there is a danger there in over investing, because if you over invest in particular things in your world or in your world as a whole, and then other players don't engage with it, you're gonna be a little wounded.
Mm-hmm.
Buckle up, players. Today we're learning about mines. Roll for structural engineering. Right. Um, and there's a running joke in that campaign where said dwarf has only rolled well on perception when in the mines.
Yeah.
Everywhere else.
Yep.
Well,
and
it's
David
been like
built
the floor is made of stone.
Yeah. David, that's like I'm looking at these pillars. You said there's 8 pillars here. I'm rolling perception. Nat 1. Cool, those pillars are spider legs. David blocked that. Well, and in that same thing, David was like, we're doing, it's not a super gritty campaign, but we're doing some gritty things, and we're doing money conversion, and it's not gold, silver, and copper. It's this whole other thing. And my eyes immediately glazed over. And I'm like, this is not fun for me. And I didn't say this is not fun for me, so we're not doing it. I said, this is not fun for me. And here's the canon perfectly, Roxy, not bright. Here's the exact reason why this character doesn't understand it. And if that screws the character over and therefore me as the player, that makes sense. I am comfortable with that. Other people are super excited to play with and be like, wait, was that person screwing with us? Is that bank taking advantage of us? And they're super into it. And I'm like, cool, y'all have fun.
I will have you know that I specifically put in the money system that I put in because Kay is like, I hate doing math. I'm not going to do math. And I had to sit down and figure out how much things cost. Like I had to go and like dig into the D&D rules, read pages and pages of forums of people like debating about the conversion between what things cost in the game versus what things cost in real life, and what things cost in real life in like medieval Europe, which is ostensibly like the setting, and like trying to match that with the level of industrialization in medieval Europe as it approached the industrial age versus where technology wise the world I had built. And look, I spent days, multiple hours across days. So I was like, you know what? And the other thing is this. Every major civilization has a name for their currency. So to add authenticity, I added names to the currency. Like we don't have copper pellets and zinc pellets. We have pennies and dimes. And
but
so
you
I
know
was
what,
like,
David?
look,
We're also not playing 4 with all of the grinding and all of the math and all of the rules. So you know what? Fine. You tell me it's freaking 5 copper. That seems reasonable. Cool. Here's my 5 copper. I'm going to go play the game.
And so I was like, look, if I had to suffer through all this, y'all get to have a little touch of this. You
No
get just a
one
little,
had to
just a,
suffer. You
just a
chose
riddle.
to suffer. You voluntarily did that to yourself, my friend.
Yep. And everybody gets to hear about it. Everyone gets the smoke. I did
Again.
this to me, and all of you have to pay for it.
So again, if you get super invested in something and your players don't want to, and again, I'm able to tease David because David knows. I also know that if everyone at the table went, David, I hate this, David would be like, fine, it's gold, copper, silver, right? Like,
Right.
but other people are engaging with. And so because other people are engaging and doing the work for me, I could be like, haha, I'm not doing it.
Yep.
With love, with all of the love and respect for that kind of dedication. Because David
And
knows
it
the
made
rabbit holes
for
I go
some
down.
right. And it made for some good like gameplay elements. And there are things that I've put in campaigns where I'm like, I've done tons of research about it. Everybody's gonna suffer because of it. And people are like, this is unwieldy and awful. And I'm like, okay, it's gone.
Yeah.
Like,
And it, especially this campaign, this setting, the world is 95% human. And our party, all but one person in the party is a non-human species. So the world trying to screw us over makes perfect sense. And I'll just
yeah.
lean into it. My character is not bright enough to be able to do that math. Neither is the player. So this just works out sometimes.
And like on Twitter, on the app formerly known as Twitter, um there's a discourse about racism in Baldur's Gate. And racism is an element of Dungeons and Dragons and has been since day one, whether it is overt or not, whether it is an unconscious, it's there, okay? Like tieflings get the smoke. And Connie Chang has a whole YouTube series about
It's
it.
excellent.
There are many people that have posted like long Twitter threads about resources. And I'm not going to go into the whole thing now. One, because I haven't played Baldur's Gate. Two, because I'd argue that other people have addressed it in a better way than I could off the top of my head.
And if we try to talk about racism in D&D, we might end up talking about centaurs again, so.
Right, right. Because ableism in D&D and centaur accessibility. Anyway, but I will say this, like, there are many campaigns, whether it is one shots or short campaigns, like Godplay. There's no racism in Godplay. No one is like, oh, you're a gnome, you're gonna get the smoke about that. But in my home game with people that I trust, I put racism into that world. And part of why I did that is because it's easy for me. Like it is, and I can say this as like someone who has experienced racism, that it is easy for me to use that to generate conflict in my games, because of my experiences of it. And there's a big difference between I'm using my lived experience as a way to generate conflict versus someone who is on the other side of things and at minimum has not experienced racism and may have perpetuated racism in one way or another. Like one is transpositional and the other one is lazy. And my
It is
biggest
one
complaint,
thing. It is one thing for David to go, I'm running a home game that's all about race, that's got big racism elements, and you're welcome to come play. It is a different thing for Kay to go, we're running a streamed game where racism is a central conflict. That's a
yeah,
bad look. For one. The other one is fine. Yeah.
but don't threaten me with a good time because I will put you out there and be like, listen, we're going to invent new slurs and you're going to use them. No, no, that's not going to happen. To be clear, I say a lot of things in jest chat. That is not something I will put K through. I won't do it. It's a funny idea. Am I going to sit up late at night tonight thinking about how hilarious that would be? Yes. And would I ever do that to K? No.
I'm gonna just spam the sweating rubber ducky chat
right.
emote in chat. That's what I'm gonna do right now.
But ultimately, like, I find like my biggest complaint is it's intellectually lazy. Like, one of the most compelling types of villains, and like we have a whole episode about villains, and we will do an episode about villains again because apparently I cannot let this go. And like 3 or 4 times a year I go, have we done an episode on villains? And Kay is like, yes, we have. Please stop asking me if we've done an episode on villains. And I'm like, but what about the second episode about villains? But um it's lazy because consigning a whole group for whatever reason to be bad without any reason, because that's what racism is. It's like these people are bad because they're bad. Like prejudice, like what makes so many villains memorable is their motivations. What makes so many villains compelling is they often have a good point, but then carry it too far. Like the Joker in The Dark Knight is like, people are assholes. And it's like, well, yeah, but don't blow up a boat. Like, that's bad. Don't do that. And that's
the Magneto was right t-shirt. Like, yes, Magneto was right. There is no question that Magneto was right. Wrong about a lot of things.
Was he?
Wrong about a lot of approaches, but also right.
That is a whole different conversation that I am not going to have on
the
a
era
mic.
of Magneto.
Right. But like, that's part of why Magneto is so iconic, because through Magneto, you find out that Professor X is wrong about a lot of things. And Professor X is a villain. Like I will go off about Doctor Doom anytime, anywhere, for any reason. Reed Richards is the villain and Doctor Doom is the hero. Reed Richards is an asshole. He's a terrible, terrible person. He's been a jerk from day one. And Doctor Doom really tried to mind his own business. But consigning a group of people or using racism as a way to create tension or create conflict in a storytelling experience is ultimately intellectually lazy, especially if you're not using that racism to make a bigger point. Like in my home game, part of why it's there is, one, to outline why racism is dumb. Two, to help players and the characters understand not just what the experience of racism is like, but the very organic ways in which people respond to racism. Because not everybody goes, oh man, someone was just racist to me, we're going to argue about it. 99% of the racism that you encounter, you go, eh, and then you keep it moving. And it weighs on you. And, but also, like, there's this, again, it leads into the motivations of like the villain, because the villain is like, look, racism bad. We're going to work to stop racism. We're going to, and give your villains good qualities.
Yeah.
Like it's the whole thing that I've seen referenced on the internet many times of a hero will sacrifice you to save the world. But I, my dear, I will burn the world to ashes for you. And it's like, there's something a little compelling there. Like, who loves stronger, a hero or a villain? And all of that makes your conflict like interesting and dynamic and personal in a lot of ways. And just like be like, oh, they hate you for no reason. Like,
Yeah.
kick the dog, okay? Like save the cat, kick the dog. You could have the most awful person, and if he saves the cat, that he's a hero. And if you could have the person with the best intentions, and if they kick the dog, they're a bad person. Show me someone kicking the dog. Show me your world kicking the dog. Like, show me your society kicking the dog. And of course, I say this, Kay is not fond of dogs. I'm not saying that Kay goes around kicking a dog,
Kay does
but
not.
if a dog got kicked in Kay's vicinity and Kay was in proximity of it, I'm not saying Kay kicked the dog. I'm saying that maybe the dog shouldn't have been so aggressive, because not all dogs are wholesome. Some dogs are narcs. Some dogs are bastards. And like abusers can be victims of abuse too, and that's what a canine is. A canine is a victim of abuse that also abuses people, and it's very complex. There's a lot going on here. I didn't mean to go off talking about dogs, but
I will say too, Liss, who is an incredible TTRPG performer, Daunt Liss on Twitter, please go give them follows and love. Did a wonderful breakdown of, now I have not played Baldur's Gate yet. We are working on fixing that. But there is a whole, I haven't even played it and know about it. There's a whole scene about tieflings versus druids and the fantasy racism that is very clearly rooted in real world racism comes out. And Liz, did just a tweet about their personal frustration with this, and it blew up. It blew up in the bad way. And they've been dealing with a lot, so go give Dauntless some love. But she did a great breakdown of like, hey, here's how this could have been so much more interesting if it was about resources instead of race. Think about how can you tell stories that are more interesting? Because again, I talk about this. I often talk about Critical Role. I love Critical Role. I am also very critical of Critical Role. I started with Campaign 2, and it was wholesome and interesting and challenged tropes and just really was a great little story. I didn't finish Campaign 2 because I caught up to Campaign 2. So it's to the point where I couldn't binge it anymore. I had to watch it live. So I had to like take days off from watching a TTRPG, which is just torture. So I'm like, I'm going to jump in at Campaign 1. And Campaign 1 was just laced with sexism and not good tropes and just a mean world. And I don't mean a mean world in that, like, of course the world of a TTRPG is usually mean. Usually bad things are out to kill. I just mean like Harry Potter kind of mean world. And it was such a slap in the face. It was so different from the feeling of Campaign 2 when they had clearly gone, oh, our stories are impacting people. Maybe we should rethink a few things. Maybe we can tell stories that don't require sexism, that don't require the world to be this way. And I personally found Campaign 2 so much more compelling and interesting because it wasn't just, oh yeah, this is a group of warriors, big, strong, mostly naked men. Of course they're going to be sexist. Of course I know what's coming.
I want to write a campaign with a bunch of big, mostly naked men, except it would get pulled down from Twitch for terms of service violations because there'd be 55-gallon drums of olive oil and everybody would be having a good time.
David, I have to ask. And I hate that I know this exists, and I hate that I have to ask if you know this. Do you know about Dick Fight Island?
I will know shortly.
BRB, David is going to Google a thing. You can mostly say, maybe not at work, but this is a real thing and it exists and it is absolutely wild. And converting this into a TTRPG would truly be fascinating. It is, so Dick Fight Island is a manga, which is exactly what it sounds like.
That's what it says in the tin.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's on the label is what you get.
Dudes with great big swords, and they custom decorate their scabbards, and they're on an island and they sword fight.
Hot. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
It is real.
And here's something else that bothers me about major companies that run into racism problems. And like, you know, if you're a small 1 or 2 person TTRPG team and you write something and you stumble onto something that is like charged language or something and you didn't know, then you now have the opportunity to go, I didn't know, I didn't have the resources to know. Now that I know, I'm going to fix it. Hasbro, who has Transformers money, has no excuse.
I think you told me this, David. Yeah. Hasbro made more money off of Baldur's Gate than they did Transformers.
And I'm not going to say, because like I've heard many people say, okay, we'll just go hire queer people, go hire Black people. And there are people who are Black and queer and other and members of other minority groups that are qualified. But there are experts. Like racism is a thing, like racism, sexism, every type of discrimination has been studied, has been quantified. The impacts on our present day world and on the historical world are odds are the co-host.
Says no.
All have experts, all have academics where their whole career is studying these things, how they come about, how they perpetuate, and things that we can do to stop them. Stop it. Same thing with fascism. Same thing with genocide. Like they're experts that you could go out and contact. Go find these people, give them money, and incorporate, not just ask for, incorporate their expertise.
Yeah. One of the biggest problems with sensitivity readers is people will bring them in a month before they launch the thing. And by then it's too late and too expensive to make those changes. And I'm going to tell you this right now, Matt. You will make a mistake. You will say or do something wrong, offensive, insensitive, whatever. Don't know what it will be. You will do something that is incorrect and should not have been done. I know because I've done it live and on air. I know incredible people who are brilliantly educated on these topics, and they've made mistakes live and on air. It will happen. We live in a world where things are changing so quickly. We live in a world where there are layers of complexity that you cannot reasonably know all of it. Sooner or later, we will all hurt someone we did not mean to. And I'm not saying it's okay, because it's not okay, but it is inevitable. What matters is how you handle it after that. If you say, I am sorry. I am addressing it. It will not happen again. I will do better. And you do better, then you've done the good and right thing. If you ignore it, if you continue to do it, that's a different conversation. So,
and
remember that.
If I hear one more person say, I have a black friend, I have a blank friend, this is fine, I will physically fight them. Because like Kay said, we've stumbled into this ourselves. And in something that we're working on, something that I was developing for a home game, Kay and I were talking, and I was like, oh, I want to put this in. Now, to preface this, my business partner and one of my best friends is an Orthodox Jew. He and I have spent hours and hours and hours and hours and hours talking about his religion. It's one of my like, for about a year straight, 90% of our conversation was about what is and is not kosher food wise, because I'm really fascinated by it. And because I want to be able to accommodate him when he's with me so that he doesn't feel put out. And despite all of the conversations that we've had, as well as I know his religion as an outsider, both through my discussions with him and my independent research, in my independent research that I have then used to compile questions and gone to him and be like, okay, I have these questions about things. I said, hey, Kay, I'm going to put a golem in this. And Kay is like, no, you're not. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And then, Kay rolled up the newspaper, bonked me on the nose, and was like, no, bet, hit me with the script. But no, a golem is from Jewish mythology. And, we pull from many different mythologies for the things that we have. Like, that's just what is done. And it's okay to do it. But how you treat those mythologies, especially when they have real world connection, like present day real world connections.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we can go on and on about how like Zeus was an asshole, and if you go 2,500 years ago and wander into Greece and be like, hey, you know that Zeus guy, he's a real dickbag, people are going to agree with you. But it's different doing that. What would be different is, going 2,500 years ago, walking into the town square and be like, Zeus doesn't throw lightning, he throws hay, or, he throws rocks. Then people are going to look at you and be like, listen, you can't play around with that. Which is why, in another game I'm building, and parts of a game that I've run, I actually have cribbed some Native American legends. And I have a friend who's indigenous. And I said to her, I was like, listen, talk this out with me so that I can build something that is two things. One, respectful of like your present day, very real beliefs. And two, something that is completely wrong because the inner workings and the secrets of your religious practices and your mythologies aren't for me to go and use as a monster of the week. And so I build things out that are purposely wrong, whether it's a ritual or a monster or whatever, because it's not my place to utilize those things. So Kay's like, listen, you can't use a golem. And I'm like, but why not? And she's like, Jewish folklore. And I was like, oh shit. And so I went, did the research, went to the Google, because Google's right there and Google is free. The secrets of the universe are right there. Just type in your question and read the answer.
We no longer live in an era when you have to go to a dedicated building to learn a thing, go through a complicated card system to find the book that you need, and then hope that it's there. You could just Google it from the toilet if you want to.
And like, there's so much anti-Semitism and discrimination and prejudice and so much misappropriation with Jewish folklore that, much like the uh, indigenous folklore and rituals, I don't want to take that and use it as is. Now, if and I haven't even like talked to my business partner about it, but like if a Jew is watching my stream and sees a golem and is like, that's fine, that's great, but I don't want anyone, especially like non-Jewish people or non-indigenous people, to see something and go, oh, I recognize this connected to that. It's okay for me to take this and use it for blank. Or even worse, this thing is cool. I'm going to take it and use it. Oh, what do you mean it's an essential part of someone's folklore and I'm being an asshole about it? Um, and there are things we can't necessarily avoid. Like, you're going to have like Tiamat, and you're going to have like a lot of like, real world things that are part of the 5e pantheon, that are part of the other major pantheons of um different systems. Like, you're going to have weddings. Like, we can go back and forth about like the history of the wedding and like the purposes of weddings, but like there are some like cultural artifacts that you just can't, like human society. There are only so many things that we do. Like, we all eat food one way or another, and every society has specific rituals about eating food. And that's something that like, there are only so many different types of way you can eat food, and I'm sure someone on the internet just figured out a new way to eat food, and they made it like weird and slapped it behind a paywall, and someone's subscribing to that service right now. But that is not the point. The point is, as much as we can, it's important to be respectful of others, even if we have that one person who's like, that'll be fine. That's great. The audacity to think that that one person speaks for an entire ethnic group, an entire minority, um, or all these like big interconnected peoples is ludicrous. Like, there are things that Kay and I talk about, whether it is about women are not binary or ace things, or about black things, and we get into a lot of like very deep discussions about it, but neither of us go, okay, this is what all ace people think. And it's important to talk to people, because a black person or someone who's a member of the LGBTQ family will tell you, look, here are all the different perspectives that I know. There are more perspectives on it. Not everybody all has the same idea about this. Like, I can't even say all black people think racism is bad, and that hurts me inside to say that, but it's also true. So to go back to what Mimics and Misfits said, um, as a single person or as a small creator, build the thing. Have the courage to build the thing. Have the courage to launch it. Also have the courage to say, whoops, I'm told that this is bad and this is messed up, and then I will fix it. Because the single biggest problem I have is people doubling down. Like, if Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast went, oopsie whoopsie, we made a fucky wucky with racism in Baldur's Gate, it's too big a thing for us to take out of this, but proceed with caution. And then the next things that we make, here are the diversity people that we've hired. Here are the professionals and experts and academic researchers that we deeply involved in the process of the next thing that we make to avoid this in the future, then I frankly would not care about the racism in Baldur's Gate 3. But we haven't heard that. And we might. There's still time. Who knows? And I know there are a lot of good people at Wizards of the Coast. I know there are a lot of good people at Larian, and I bet someone's having this conversation right now. And let's hope that powers that be do the right thing. But we shall
And
see.
as a small creator, a single creator building stuff, hopefully you'll be as fortunate as I have been, and you will have folks like Candace and Rex in your Discord server who will say, hey, maybe the thing you're working on isn't as cool as you think it is, and you can reel it in. So it is difficult to walk that line of sharing things and not oversharing, not giving things away, but you can find your circle of trust. If you can find people who are as excited to tell the same kinds of stories that you are, we will all support each other because this community is amazing about giving and giving back.
And one other thing, and I know we're running long, but one other thing that I want to say is nothing good is ever made in a vacuum. And it's not just everything that you imagine is an amalgamation of your experiences with like a little twist on it. Like that's fine and dandy. That's true. But also, like, nothing that I've made in the TTRPG world could achieve the goodness that it has without Kay's involvement. Like, I have at this point decades of experience, of professional experience in storytelling, and yet Kay says things to me where it's like, oh, I didn't think. I mean, it's also why I have a writing partner. Like,
That's why beta readers for writers are so important.
Right. There's this great story from Orson Scott Card where he had dropped the Ender's Shadow series, because like there's Ender's Game, that's a whole series, and then he takes one of the characters from Ender's Game and makes an entire separate series about it. And he had gone off and written like 3 or 4 other series, like a couple books in a bunch of different series, and then he went, oh man, I gotta go back and work on the 8th book in this series. And so he called up like his mega fans and got a couple of beta readers and was like, all right, listen, tell me about my world. And they literally told him, they got a copy of a couple of chapters, and they're like, look, in book 3 on page 142, such and such happened. And so you can't do that here because it doesn't make sense. And Orson Card went, how could you possibly know that? But because they were mega fans, because they knew the material better than he did, he leaned on them as a resource. And like, I'm fortunate enough that in the TTRPG community, like there's Mimics and Misfits and Rex and Candace and all these other people that I could go, hey, I'm thinking about doing a thing. What do you think of this? And obviously, the first person I go to is Kay, and Kay usually goes, "Are you sure you want to do that? Because that doesn't sound like good.
That is not what happens, David.
That is not what happens. But like, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. Like, yeah, Jim Butcher leans on the wiki for the Dresden Files, and part of what we're doing is we're building a wiki so that we can have that resource. But whether it is about like racism and prejudice and like avoiding doing the icky things, or if it's just, is this cool? Is this interesting? Like, don't feel like you got to do it in a vacuum. Like, and obviously, like, be respectful of not just other people's time, but their energy and efforts and their expertise. because there's an old adage slash joke where someone goes to the doctor and he's like, "Oh man, my knee is bad," and then the doctor walks in, looks at him and goes, "Buy new shoes," and he's like, "Oh, that'll be $1,500," and he's like, "Excuse me, you were here for 15 seconds," and he's like, "One, is your problem solved? Two, you're not paying for the money that you're not paying for the time that I spent with you. You're paying for all the time that I spent getting to the point where I could tell you your problem in 15 seconds." Um, right. Stephen King. Stephen King has a network of people that keep him on the straight and narrow. If nothing else, they hide the cocaine. But like, yeah, everyone has like a support system. So don't feel like you gotta sit in like a dome of silence to create a thing, because there are people you know who will be excited about what you are working on and who will be willing to help.
Mhm. And so, if you are looking to build things, lean on your community. I'm so happy I get to see this reaction. If you are, I'm so distracted now. If you feel your campaign cooling, speak to your players and keep in mind that it is not necessarily a you thing. It is just that something is not clicking, and it might be scheduling. There are a number of things it can be. So ask, communicate, and don't become so invested in particular parts of your world that you try and ram your players down that railroad line, because they might not like it. And yes, I believe we should probably wrap this up before David starts talking about what he's looking at right now.
Yep.
My codependence issues say different, but okay, sure. I mean, look, it is terrifying to be like, ooh, 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 do you still like me? Because I still like you. Do you still want to play my game? But it also feels so much better to just be like, ah, that's what the problem was. We've had a player who was like, I was really quiet in today's game and I didn't do much and I feel bad about it, but I had a big thing that I had to do after this game and it was just weighing on me and I didn't realize how much it was weighing on me until it was done. And there was no harm, no foul, and we were all happy that they showed up for the game. So happy they got to play, and so happy that next time they get to have a little bit more involvement because they'll have less on their mind. So that, I think, is what we have going on. We've got Wireless Riot playing the Cheyenne Saga. We've got Cypher of Tyr playing Baldur's Gate. We've got Xanderific playing Oracle of Ages, The Legend of Zelda. Land Party Live is doing Dungeons and Dragons. What are we feeling today, y'all?
You know what I'm gonna say.
Alrighty. I will keep an eye to see if anyone else has suggestions on who we should raid, but I am going to wrap this up and flip us over to the ending screen. Thank you all for hanging out with us. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for being hilarious in chat. Like, I might grumble about it. It is not true grumble. It is not true outrage. I am delighted and entertained all the time. Thank you for sharing your hilarious selves with us. I am so happy we got through this episode. Yay!
Right?
Third time was the charm. So yes, we will flip to the end screen. We're going to do a raid. Thank you all for hanging out with us. I hope I will see you tomorrow over on what's it called? What is it called? The Initiative Order. That is at 3 p.m. Eastern, so noon Pacific. Weird time. But if not, hopefully we will see you later for some Palia. Be kind to yourselves. Be excellent to others. We will see you next time. Thank you again. Bye, y'all.